there are areas in which I fear government overreach. This is not one of them. This is a federal enclave, even under the Home Rule Act, which Congress passed in order to give limited authority to D.C. officials. Congress and the president have the ability to overrule actions that are passed under the Home Rule Act. In fact, Congress did that a couple of years ago when the district passed, a crime bill that really watered down the crimes in the district. Congress was given 30 days to overrule that. And it did.
Does Donald Trump fancy being a dictator? It's a bold question, but Trump himself last week felt he needed to dispel it. Speaking in the Oval Office this week, Donald Trump had something he wanted to clarify. "I'm not a dictator," he said. "I don't like a dictator." His comments came weeks after he deployed armed soldiers to patrol the streets of Washington, claiming that the use of the National Guard was necessary to control crime. Let's speak to John Malcolm. He's Vice President for the Institute for Constitutional Government at the Heritage Foundation, and he welcomes the deployment of National Guard in DC and has been often an intellectual who's favoured stronger executive power. Welcome, Mr. Malcolm.
Good to be with you.
Yesterday, a federal judge in California ruled that Donald Trump's deployment of the National Guard to Los Angeles this summer was illegal because it violated the Posse Comitatus Act, which limits the power of the federal government to use military force for domestic matters, and it potentially undermines the legal foundation for the DC operation, doesn't it?
No, I don't think so, for the simple reason that the District of Columbia is a federal enclave, so the president's authority to deploy the National Guard is different in the district than it is in other states. I also think that the judge who entered that ruling, I have respect for him, Charles Breyer, he's the brother of former Justice Stephen Breyer, his order is likely to be reversed. He's a liberal judge who's ruled against the Trump administration on many occasions. His orders have not fared well when they've gone to the higher courts of appeals. And the reason I think he's going to be overturned, is because there was an ICE operation, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, in Los Angeles. These ICE officers were being attacked, and it's a clear exception under the Posse Comitatus Act for federal authorities, for military authorities to come in and assist federal agents executing federal law when local authorities are either unwilling or unable to protect them. So I think that order is likely to be overturned. But I think that in terms of the president's authority to deploy the National Guard, he has plenary authority in the district, which, as I say, is a federal enclave. It's not a state.
Well, I've been a guest of the Heritage Foundation, and that you kindly invited me to give evidence to Congress on pension policy. And one of the reasons I was interested in doing that is because the Heritage Foundation stands for limited government, and I respect that idea. Aren't you worried that this isn't really limited government? The President of the United States sending in federal troops, effectively overruling whatever home rule measures there might be in the district. Doesn't this worry you that you're giving power to government you might not be able to get back?
Well, as I say, there are areas in which I fear government overreach. This is not one of them. This is a federal enclave, even under the Home Rule Act, which Congress passed in order to give limited authority to D.C. officials. Congress and the president have the ability to overrule actions that are passed under the Home Rule Act. In fact, Congress did that a couple of years ago when the district passed, a crime bill that really watered down the crimes in the district. Congress was given 30 days to overrule that. And it did. Here you have Immigrations and Customs Enforcement who are enforcing our nation's immigration laws in ways in which the Biden administration simply did not for the last 4 years. That created a large influx of illegal immigrants into this country, and ICE is trying to remedy that. That is a federal prerogative. Immigration laws are passed by Congress, and so the president is simply executing federal law and trying to prevent their ICE agents from being attacked while doing so.
If Joe Biden had deployed National Guard to the streets or troops to the streets of Washington, would you feel the same way?
It depends on the circumstances. He allowed this situation to get out of control with an open border policy. Certainly, if there were things like the George Floyd riots, and in which there was essentially a rebellion going on within a particular city, and the police or local authorities were unwilling or unable to quell those riots, he would have been well within his rights to call out the National Guard, which is exactly, for instance, what George W. Bush did following the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. So these are all fact dependent, depending on the circumstances.
Okay, well, that's the issue of the National Guard and troops in Washington. But let's just look at actions more generally. In 2019, Dr. Kim Holmes, who's another vice president of the Heritage Foundation, praised the way that John Bolton had served the US with distinction. Are you at all worried that very shortly after criticising the president's policy, Mr. Bolton was arrested?
Well, Kim Holmes, one, is retired now. He's no longer at Heritage. I haven't really weighed in on that issue. I mean, the concern is that John Bolton retained classified information, and that was picked up on wire communications with enemies overseas through, lawful surveillance techniques. I have no idea whether that is true or not. I certainly think that retaining classified information, particularly the type of classified information to which Mr. Bolton had access, is a very serious matter. Whether he did it or not, I have no idea.
You're not concerned that maybe the FBI is being used, or the Justice Department in general is being used to pursue the enemies of the president? It wouldn't, after all, be the first president to have an enemies list.
Look, I think it's a serious question, and people are raising that, not only with respect to John Bolton, but with respect to others as well. And I think they're right to ask such questions. I think there ought to be oversight. You don't want the Justice Department being weaponized. Certainly Donald Trump believed that it was weaponized against him and others like General Flynn, who served in his administration. So these are legitimate inquiries. I would want to know the facts before I said whether it was true or not.
Well, that's an interestingly nuanced answer. But I wanted also to ask about law firms, because that really concerned me, that withdrawing the security clearance access and ability to win federal contracts of critical law firms. Are you comfortable with that?
Look, I certainly think that was a very aggressive action. It is not something that I think I would have done were I president of the United States. But of course, no one has voted for me. Over 70 million people voted for Donald Trump in the last election.
Yeah, but the Constitution obviously exists to provide some limits. I understand, and your work on this is very interesting. That you think there should be more executive power, and that obviously relates to this a bit, but there must be some limits by Constitution, even of people who are elected by a large number of people. In fact, maybe precisely because they have been.
Yeah, you make the statement that I'm in favor of more executive power. I've never come out and said, by God, we need more executive power. I look at these things situation by situation to see whether the president is justified, has the authority to do what he wants to do, and whether or not it's a wise use of resources in order to do that. I certainly think that any time the government threatens to squelch the First Amendment rights of any individual, and that includes, by the way, the right of lawyers to represent clients, there is a threat. There's a potential chilling effect on lawyers' ability to zealously advocate. On the other hand, I know the president has certain authorities and that law firms can abuse those actions. I haven't looked into the individual cases. Some of these law firms are fighting these actions in court. So far, they've had pretty good success. Others are choosing to settle. But it was certainly a very aggressive action, and one which I have also questioned. But whether or not, in each instance they were justified, I'd need to know the facts underlying them.
And finally, if I may, do you think that the law and order situation in Washington has been helped by pardoning people who were engaged in clearly illegal actions on January the 6th, pardoning hundreds of those criminals and deciding that maybe to go after the people who put them in jail in the first place? Do you think that might have contributed to a sort of atmosphere of lawlessness in Washington?
No, I think that there was a lawless situation in Washington long before that happened, and that it continues. That has nothing to do with whether I think that was a good use of the pardon power or not. But I certainly don't think that it's contributed to.
Was it good use of the pardon power?
I'm sorry?
Was it good use of the pardon power?
President has plenary authority. I certainly think that the vast majority of people who were charged on January 6th, while I in no way, shape, or form excuse what they did, they were overcharged. You had misdemeanor trespasses being charged as felonies. You had assaults on federal officers being charged as seditious conspiracy. I certainly think that those were overcharges. Pardoning is certainly a dramatic thing. The president has the right to do it. I suspect that he did it, one, because he believed these people were all being overcharged, and two, he didn't want to have this issue dogging over his administration in the way that, say, the Russiagate scandal dogged his first administration. He had the right to do it. I probably would not have exercised the pardon power in that way.
Thank you very much. That was a very helpful and useful interview. John Malcolm, Vice President for the Institute for Constitutional Government at the Heritage Foundation.